Well, it's no point setting off on a long trip with a tyre that's just about done. There's nothing quite like having a new tyre. Let's hope this one goes on easily.
I decided to take a few days to zip over to Nova Scotia to take a look at the western end of the province and the shorelines of the Bay of Fundy. The weather promised to be good for the whole week, so I wasn't too dismayed by a bit of early morning mist. Unless you're a long-distance hero, it's a 2-day ride from where I live in eastern Ontario to Nova Scotia, almost all of it on 4-lane highway. I figured almost 900 kilometres was plenty for the first day. After a few more hours on the 4-lane, I turned west around the head of the Bay of Fundy, heading for the Chignecto Provincial Park, along quiet, pleasant back roads. The cavalcade's lazy power perfectly suited drifting along in an unhurried pace. The Bay of Fundy has the highest tides in the world, so every little creek and stream near the bay gets back-flooded twice a day. Stopping often for photographs, I eventually made it along the Chignecto Peninsula, a big, rocky headland between two arms of the Bay of Fundy. I planned to camp and do a little hiking, but first I had to get to my campsite. My intention was to ride here to this provincial park on the Bay of Fundy and do a little hiking. Well, it's a bit late in the day, so I'm just going to go up to the top of this hill, which is just about killing me. And taking you right up to the top of the hill by the looks of it. I hope there's a cliff look once I get up here. It's been a beautiful day, just gorgeous sunshine once the fog went off this morning. I expect it's going to be chilly tonight, and by the time I wake up in the morning it'll probably be foggy down in the valley, but that's just the way things go this time of year. But it's all good. Now I've just got to see if I can light myself a fire and sit back, have a couple of beers, maybe write something on the computer, and then go to sleep. This day was spent riding around Minas Basin, sticking as close to the shore as the roads allowed. The water has that wonderful ruddy mud colour from millions of tons of silt washed in from the surrounding cliffs and streams. I saw a sign for Burnt Coat Cliffs and Lighthouse, so of course I had to take it. I'm glad I did. My tent was still soggy from the heavy mist at Chignecto Park, so I ended the day at a cheap but pleasant motel in Middleton. Brier Island is Nova Scotia's most westerly point, accessed by a single road along the Digby Neck. But first, I had to make my way down the rich and beautiful Annapolis Valley
to Port Royal Historic Site. Port Royal was established in 1605 and became the first permanent French habitation in North America. It had been preceded by other attempts, but they'd not endured. The fort was never really intended for defence. It was a centre for trade with the local Mi'kmaq people, who were frequent participants in banquets called the Order of Good Cheer, introduced by Samuel de Champlain. The current buildings are reconstructions from the 1940s, based on Champlain's detailed drawings. The original buildings were burned by the British in 1613. Heading back through Granville Beach, I crossed the isthmus to Annapolis Royal, passing by the power generating plant which used to use the tidal flow to generate power. Sadly, it was also an effective fish crushing plant, and so was closed 4 years ago. Annapolis Royal looked like a pleasant little town as I wandered through the back roads, looking for Fort Anne, a British, then French, then British fort built to protect the Annapolis Royal Harbour. I found it too. Well, it's hard to miss. But I'd had enough history tours for one day, so after a quick stop, I moved on. Digby Neck is that long, thin ridge that extends out towards the ocean, and which ends at Brier Island. Apparently it's a ridge of volcanic basalt, separated from the mainland by a deep-water bay. A single road traverses its length, and to get to the end, you have to take 2 ferries. Oh, what a hardship. I have no problem waiting for ferries. I love ferries. The smaller, the better. Here comes one now. This is the East Ferry, which crosses over to Long Island and the village of Tiverton. There used to be a nominal charge for each crossing, but since 2019, they've been free. Tiverton seemed to be a nice enough little community, but I was eager to get to the second ferry and on to Brier Island. Why Brier Island? I don't know really. We humans seem to be attracted to places at the ends of roads or those furthest points that one can reach. As you can tell, I wasn't exactly having to fight with the traffic to get there, and the queues for the ferry weren't too hard to handle. There are advantages to travelling late in the season, once the crowds have gone. I hadn't realised it at the time, but accommodations on Brier Island are limited and not priced for the cheap motorcycle riding likes of me. I suppose I could have found somewhere to camp, but I chose to skip back across the water to a rather lovely campsite just across the Narrows on Long Island. The place was quiet and spotlessly clean.
I don't know how far this little path goes, but it's pretty nice. This little walk along the cliffs has been quite invigorating.
I had to backtrack along Digby Neck in the morning, then on to the west coast, sticking as close to the water as I could and avoiding the main highway. I passed countless fish plants and little harbours, most of which seemed to be involved in the lobster harvest. Nasty little corpse-eating, many-legged crustaceans. Well, but I know that view isn't shared by many, and if the number of metal traps I saw is anything to go by, it's a major industry. I was born in Great Yarmouth, England, also formerly a major fishing port, so I was curious to see how its Canadian counterpart looked. Again, it seemed a pleasant enough little town, perhaps a little rough around the edges, but with some interesting buildings and a busy harbour. Since it was midday and I was hungry, I treated myself to a proper lunch before heading down the long peninsula to Cape Fortune. I can't say I'm too interested in lighthouses, but the ride was recommended to me and, well, it was at the end of yet another road. I'm not sure the distances on these signs are necessarily accurate, but if they are, it's considerably further from Cape Fortune to Vancouver in BC than it is to the Wirral near Liverpool in England. After Yarmouth, I carried on south along the coast, breezing along without stopping much. I was thinking of staying in Shelburne, but got such sticker shock when I asked the rate of a dismal-looking motel that I headed back to Digby. The motel I ended up in cost the same amount as I was quoted in Shelburne, but at least it was convenient for the ferry. The ferry across to St. John, New Brunswick didn't leave until 11 a.m, so I had plenty of time to linger over a fine breakfast before heading to the parking area. I had the motorcycle parking all to myself, although the ferry was fairly full. The trip was uneventful. A nice way to spend 3 quiet hours gliding across the uncharacteristically calm waters of the Bay of Fundy. Once I'd wound my way through St. John, I spent the rest of that day and all the next on the Trans-Canada Highway, working my way home. The cavalcade behaved flawlessly and didn't even extract too vicious a penalty at the gas pumps. A great trip. If you've got this far, you might also enjoy my various motorcycle travel books. They're available on Amazon and Audible in digital, paperback and audiobook formats. Just search for Nick Adams Motorcycle. Thanks for watching.